lot of the folks at the panel, thank you so much for the time you've invested coming to my office and working with me. I just want to emphasize what you've said that is critically important, that of the breakthrough priorities, there's very clearly instances where Congress sits in the critical path. If we don't take action to move forward on these legislative priorities, then it will either impede or prevent completely your ability to achieve the goals you've set out. And I'll continue to mention that and stand up for it. Ms. Counsel, I want to talk to you for a minute about IT. It is fantastic to have somebody with your professional experience in the role that you're in, and I'm glad to have you there. Can you give me an idea of what your instincts are telling you as you look at this enormous IT base? You and I have talked about application portfolio, and we could talk in acronyms that most people would think would be a second language or a language. But can you tell me what your gut tells you the IT platform looks like 5 years from now versus today in terms of off-the-shelf solutions, integrated platforms, those sorts of things that I think are, at least according to the Secretary and others, are huge enablers to what you all are trying to accomplish?
Yes. There we go. Senator Tillis, it's great to talk to you as well. I won't use any acronyms this time. As we sort of look out and into the future, one of the things that's become very clear, not just on intuition but on fact, is that we have a very complex architecture and a variety of different things in our midst, and so figuring out how to manage those today and move off of them and move into the future is critical. One of the critical areas that I think that will look very different in the future is how we manage and use data and how we leverage that data in support of the veteran. We, I believe, have a prime opportunity with putting in a data management function, but putting in something that is very different than anyone has seen at this point, that will move us forward to have much more agility related to our operations, related to what the veteran will need, increasing our ability to be much more mobile, and have mobility being used by the veteran and their access to their information, as well as our ability to speak and engage with them. And I think also when we look at our infrastructure, having a much more solid supply chain capability, a financial system that will enable much more visibility into the environment, but also ensuring that we have some best-of-breed capabilities wrapped around our health care as well as in our benefits area.
Well, one thing, and I want to try and get a lot in the last couple of minutes, but one thing I'd really like to see from you all over a time that makes sense, not out of order for all the things you need to do to transform the IT operation, is something that would give me some sense that these duplicative or redundant platforms that are used out in the VISNs are consolidated when they make sense. There are very clear patterns that I can view when I take a look at these transition plans, and I'd like to see that so that I know that we're making the organizational changes and the systems changes to make a lot of these things that are falling through the cracks probably the root cause of a lot of the problems that we have. So I'd appreciate the opportunity to maybe get briefed up with you as you've gotten your legs there, and appreciate it. I want to go into a lightning round real quick because I want to try and stick to my time. First, I just want to echo the sentiments here. We need to confirm the IG and do everything that I can to get the Inspector General there. It's a very vital role. We need somebody in a permanent position. Mr. McDonald, this organization chart seems to me to be an optimized state. I mean, it's a pyramid. It looks like you got the right distribution with, that really being, but today it seems to me like it's an obelisk. One thing that we haven't really talked about here is the organizational change, and over time, you don't necessarily, unless you have data here, I'd like to find out what we're doing in the middle to reorganize and either eliminate those resources or free up the resources to provide care out in the communities. Can you give me some idea? We haven't talked much about that track. Can you give me some idea of what that looks like?
Well, the middle is the most important part, as you well know, of any organization. Number one, Training. As I talked, we're training the leadership team. That training is now cascading through the organization. 12,000 senior leaders will have been trained. We're training leadership, we're training process mapping, we're training Lean Six Sigma, values, mission, all the important things, 3 days of training. Number two is structure, spans and layers. We have to reduce the number of spans and reduce the number of layers.
Okay.
We talked about moving from 21 VISNs to 18. That's already shown savings. That was in my oral testimony. But the fact that we have so many open positions is an opportunity to reduce even more. And so with every open position, we really question, David and I question and Sloan, whether or not we should fill it.
Yeah. Well,
So we want to reduce spans, we want to reduce layers, and we can share that plan
Thank
with
you.
you next time we meet.
I'd like to get that. It's just because my time's
Yeah,
short that I'm
sorry.
cutting you off. But I think seeing a measurable, instinctively, this organization looks like it's heavy in the middle. And with that comes cost and complexity and breakdowns and handoffs. So I'd like to see what that transformation looks like over time, both in terms of its structure, but in terms of the people. And to your point, many of them may be open, so it just means you no longer have a need for that position. But I think that would be helpful so that people understand there is an organizational transformation that's going on. Last thing, and just to follow up, when a veteran calls for help, let's say it's a distress call for a veteran who may be worried that they're thinking about suicide, how are these calls tracked? In other words, if I get reports, as I have in North Carolina recently, that a veteran called and was told to call back, how can I track that down and either make sure that person has been trained and hasn't done their job, therefore they should be fired, or that their supervisor hasn't gotten them the appropriate training to make sure that that is never an appropriate disposition if in fact it's happening? What I want to do is at least go in and be proactive and say, maybe I don't have the facts straight based on what I've been reported on the ground, but if those facts are right, then I want to go after that person for doing the wrong thing for a vet. And I'd like your advice on that, either in the committee or afterwards.
Well, it's a very complex issue, so let me give you a headline and then we'll come over and talk about our Veterans Crisis Line. As you know, one of our priorities for this year is to fix the outreach to veterans and the Veterans Crisis Line. When all of us came, new people, to this organization, what we discovered was the Veterans Crisis Line, a recent IG report, which was written starting on an investigation that started in May of 2014, so before I was confirmed, found that we had a third party that we had contracted with that was using voicemail. Well, you don't use voicemail for a crisis line. We have put new leaders in place. We hired a person with experience on Philadelphia 311. They've come in. We've got new technology in place, new training in place, but we've got to get out of the potential for a veteran being put on hold, having to call a different number. We still have some medical centers, and we're trying to discover which those are and then eradicate them, where if they call the medical center and there's an emergency, it says, please call this number, rather than immediately shifting that call. We're trying to identify where those are and then shift the call automatically rather than having them call back. So this is a work in progress. We're happy to brief you on it. It's taking us longer than we like, but it is one of our goals for this year, and we do need the budget to do it.
Senator Sullivan.